Makoko is a community that has existed for nearly 100 years. It's basically an aquatic community that, it's got almost no roads, no land, no modern infrastructure. It's been growing increasingly. It's got like 100,000 people reportedly. I doubt it. But even if it is 20,000 people living on water in this sort of condition, that is a city in itself. Makoko, in the technical sense, is a slum. It's got issues of housing, poor housing quality, sanitation is really bad there. The quality of education is poor. They don't have enough facilities for education. There's no infrastructure. There's very little infrastructure. And so when I went there, like I said, I was both shocked, at the same time inspired. And I said, well, if I can learn from you to understand how you've done this, I would like to help. And they said, I said, what can I do? They said, well, we have a school for kids, about 200 students, and we want to expand this school. In addition to that, the school also gets flooded once in a while because it's built on reclaimed land. So how can you help us? I'm like, okay, good. I will see what you can do. If you can build these houses yourselves for about $5,000 or whatever dollars, that's so cheap, I'm sure I will be able to build one for you and make improvements on it. And that's how we started this relationship, collaboration. And because I also partly live in the Netherlands, I was able to sort of bring a global perspective to it. But more importantly was also to work with the local people. The team there who know how they built, who've built there for many years, who know what type of timber they use, who understand everything within the environment. So it was a collaboration between a global network of people and a local network. So like I said, they live on stilts, these sort of stilted houses, and that has worked for them for many years. But things are changing, climate is changing. And what's happening is that there's increase in rainfall, and sometimes they find themselves trapped within this condition because they're on these stilts and it's a fixed height. But more importantly is also that because the soil condition is very poor there, there's a limitation to the amount of the height that they can build. And the moment you try to build higher, you'd have to have foundations, piles, and the cost of construction becomes very expensive. So when I tried to build an extension to the school, the first thing was someone said, well, you need to do a foundation, a soil test, and they came back with millions of dollar costs, a very high cost for the foundation. And I'm like, okay, no, this is not sustainable. I'm not going to be able to, if I build one, you can't build the next, So I had to find a solution that would eliminate the issue of the foundation. And that's how we thought about floating the structure. And that, of course, addresses the fact that when the level of water changes, the building can adapt to the variation in height. So the solution was, of course, the hybrid of the local knowledge and a global flotation technology. And the building is essentially a triangle. And it's a triangle, of course, because, well, first of all, it's a very primitive form. It's a roof, fundamental building form in a tropical environment. Secondly, a triangle is the most stable structure for a flotation because the higher you go, it relatively has a low center of gravity and stability is much better than any other shape. We've done a lot of calculations around how this works, so it wasn't just about strapping some wood and barrels together. And it's a building that is completely naturally ventilated. We have, we've got solar panels for energy. Like I said, it harvests rainwater, collects the rainwater, and uses some of that for the vegetation. We're now working on the agricultural part of it, where the waste is used as compost, and the compost is used for the vegetable farm. It's all, built out of all local materials. Now, when we're trying to build a flotation device, which is perhaps the most challenging piece of it, we said, well, how do we do this? You know, a floating building is not particularly a new thing, you know? I mean, you find floating buildings everywhere, but how can you build a floating structure in a local environment like that in a way that the local community can handle? You know, so we looked at different options, steel barge, et cetera. We looked at different criteria, and of course we settled for what was right there within the community. And this is the interesting thing about this project from the start, is that every time we had a challenge, every time I had a challenge on the project, all I needed to do was to just look around, and the solution would be right there. So we saw these kids floating on plastic barrels. I'm like, okay, wow, okay, there's a flotation device, of course. And then I looked, I mean, in Lagos, because it's a port city, there are tons of plastic barrels that are used and that we could reuse. So that became the obvious choice. We strapped together the first plastic barrels, and we created this platform, launched it, and the kids jumped on it as though it was just nature. They're already very used to that environment. I mean, even much more comfortable than we ever imagined. So this was a sort of a first intervention, and then we expanded this 16 times, strapped them together in a way that was modular to create a 100 square meter floating platform, floating real estate, if you call it, and extended this real estate 3 floors up to create 220 square meters of a floating structure out of local materials, also within the community. This is, so the site of the school is somewhere there. Everything, like I said, it's a sewing community. So everything was within maybe 100 or 150 meters of the community. So this is the structure. Even like the kids jumped on the first platform. Once we finished this, the Christmas party was held on the structure. So it became useful from the very first day of construction. And we built a roof on the top. And the idea is that first of all, it's a floating structure. And the structure can be, whether it's a school, a house, you know, a church, a mosque, a theater, anything can be within it. And it's also scalable. We've got 3 floors now. We can scale it down to 2, scale it down to 1, multiply to create, you know, to let it to grow, you know, almost cultivate like you would cultivate agriculture. The impact so far, of course, we've provided education, a facility for education for children. Employment, this 220 square meter structure was built by 8 local carpenters with nothing more complicated than a hand drill in just a few weeks. It's a skill they taught me how to build. They're like, okay, look, this is how, you know, using nails, joints, you know, very basic tools. It's become a marketplace for the women from the first day. You know, they just hang out there, they're trading, they're selling fish. You know, it's brought a lot of awareness to the community. Makoko is actually on Lagos Monopoly. It's a space for arts and crafts, so when the students are not there, you know, the community uses space for work. There's you know, it's brought a lot of interest, tourist attraction to the community, and a huge community space where, you know, there's always gathering, there are functions happening in there. And of course, it's a landmark, or did I say watermark maybe? So back again, African Water Cities project. It's about looking into these kinds of conditions. And Makoko is, of course, one water community, but you know, the idea of the project is a structure around looking, you know, providing a solutions platform that addresses the issues of architecture, environment, energy, social, cultural, you know, bringing a number of people together from government authorities, NGOs, public sponsors, technical partners. Everyone here would probably have interest in doing a thing like this. And there are many makokos, hundreds of makokos all around Africa. There are hundreds of little communities that are within or in proximity to larger communities, whether it's in Gambia, in Benin, in Senegal, Ghana. We are seeing these little, there's a symbiotic relationship between cities on the coast and the communities around them. And there's an interesting dialogue. I mean, the issue of urbanization is really about deruralization. People are moving from rural environments to urban environments. Why are they doing that? It's because cities are places of opportunities. Cities have become places that people aspire to. And people if they leave their rural environments to seek new opportunities, perhaps what we should be addressing is not just at the cities, it's also about the communities. How can we improve the conditions of communities to enable the communities have the infrastructure that they need in a way that they can grow sustainably? So what's Venice, the most renowned water city today, is an amazing place. But what's interesting is, of course, Venice is called Incola Lacune. The first settlers of Venice are, I don't know the right pronunciation, but it apparently means lagoon dwellers. So the first settlers of Venice were no different from people of Makoko many years ago. And today Venice is such an amazing place.